Looking into the future and keeping in mind how difficult it was to get people to actually conform to many of the medically recommended behaviors in the pandemic, do you see a real culture change in terms of health behaviors in the future? So, for example, automatically wearing a mask when sick. This seems especially important when considering conditions of the residential experience at a college or university.
Right.
Good question, Christy.
Great question, and I'll it's a big question in some ways. I'll say two things. One is that I think when you live in a wealthy country like the United States, this maybe it's intuitive, maybe it's not to people. I think there's this belief system that we can wait for science to rescue us. We'll take the pill, we'll have the procedure, we'll do whatever it takes. We don't necessarily have to lean into the basic public health stuff. That's what you do if you don't have science to rescue you. And you can call it whatever you want, hubris, perhaps, whatever it may be. But that ended up being a really faulty strategy. I mean, even now, leave the vaccines alone. You should know, and people do know this, that in Wuhan, China, where this pandemic started, they were having rave parties at the end of summer last year. That's how quickly they got through the worst of the pandemic. Far fewer people obviously got infected or died. We waited because we waited for science to rescue us. And science is, I mean, the vaccines are an incredible feat. But I think sometimes it's tough to know the answer to your question, Christy, about the future. Will we now, having gone through this incredibly traumatic experience, be more willing to just lean into the basic public health practices in the future? I will say yes, and here's why. I think one country that I've paid particularly close attention to is Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has also done really well through this pandemic. They neighbor China. They're very close to where this pandemic originated. And they went through SARS back in 2003, and it was devastating for them. As a result, I think, 17 years later, this is happening, 16 years later, and right away, they go into the mask-abiding sort of behaviors and other things. And I think it really helped them a lot. So I'd like to think so. And I think, we'll get the answer to that question, because I think there will be likely another outbreak or epidemic or even a pandemic in our lifetime.